Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that digs just a little bit deeper. It is Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and this is the 70th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society, the first episode of our 8th season. And as we always do with each set of episodes, we start with a current feature. And this week, we're going to talk about Disney and Pixar's film, Lightyear. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts here at the No Name Cinema Society. Already it's seeming like it's going to be a slow year this year because we're doing something a little unusual. Throughout this year, we've been producing screenplay readings in both New York and Los Angeles based on the films that we studied as part of our 1942 in review, films celebrating their 80th anniversaries this year. And those readings have been far more work than we've anticipated. We've done 3 so far, 1 in LA and 2 in New York. Obviously, I'm in LA in a moment, but back to New York early next week. So it only looks like we're going to get to do 2 or 3 episodes this season. And then, of course, our finale episodes, which we're very excited about. Now, normally, I don't wear dress shirts on regular season episodes. I save those for the finale. But it's a special night, not only because it's our first episode of the season, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is the 4th time in our history that we ever reviewed an animated film. In episode 6, we reviewed the film Home from DreamWorks. In episode 13.1, we reviewed the film Minions. Most recently, in episode 61.1, we reviewed Over the Moon. So that's a little bit of our history for the No Name Cinema Society in terms of animated films, our 4th ever one that we're reviewing. Now it's time to introduce my co-hosts here, and one of them is not Luke Skywalker. I've got a couple of cadet space rangers here. First, ladies and gentlemen, a bumbling cadet who thinks he's from New Zealand, Max Fauno is here.
Hello, I have my elusive lightsaber.
I assume that's his attempt at a Kiwi accent. He might be a good one. I actually have to do more studying on that. And also with us, ladies and gentlemen, an elderly convict doing community service on this show. Ladies and gentlemen, his birthday was yesterday. Jim Carroll is here.
I mean, really, happy birthday to us.
And then that's where I'm leading, because if his birthday was yesterday, that means that
your birthday's coming up.
Mine is today.
Damn it!
Happy birthday
today!
Wow!
I was thinking the 25th.
Today is my birthday.
A lot of surprises.
Jim always has the day before mine. Although maybe he
still you haven't caught up.
Every year I try.
It happens that way.
Slow down, Jim. Slow down.
So anyway, it is my birthday, and so the party's coming up a little later. But before then, here is our schedule for this, our 70th, 70 episodes. It starts, of course, today on my birthday with a review of Lightyear. Next Monday, June 27th, will be a review of our Indie Spotlight Brigsby Bear from 2017. We're going to go back to one of our 1986 films a week from today on June 30th with a review of Howard the Duck. And a special Tuesday episode as we avoid the 4th of July. July the 5th, our 54th Sound Off. We're going to do a tweet beat, a book review, and Max and I will be counting down our top 5 films from 1986.
I'm starting to count them down now in preparation.
I appreciate what you
just
prepared.
inside.
Yeah, and also it's drinking time, and so I'm going to pregame here for my birthday with a 40 here of Elysian Space Dust IPA. Is anybody drinking with me tonight?
No, I'm a single parent tonight, so I have to keep my wits about me.
What do you got there, Max? That's a tall glass. It probably
dirty water.
Yeah, it is dirty water. Here is our drinking slide for you, the audience, to play along. These are suggestions you guys sent in that you guys drink to whenever we do these things on the show. Anytime I say all-time contrivance, contrived, verisimilitude, or diegesis. Anytime Jim mentions his kids, and anytime Max makes a funny voice or does mime.
Oh, no.
There you go. Time to drink. Cheers out there to the audience here. I'm ready. I'm going to drink. And then go straight to the summary. You guys ready?
Also.
I am ready.
Lightyear. In a desperate attempt to escape a hostile planet, Buzz Lightyear breaks the ship and strands hundreds of his colleagues in this uncharted territory. A mistake he is hell-bent on correcting. Opening thoughts, 1 sentence or less. Max, how'd you feel about the film? It does qualify as less than a sentence, so I appreciate that as an opening thought. Jim, 1 sentence or less.
I agree with Max. Literally what I was going to do.
Interesting. And so it sounds like I liked it the best. My opening thought is formulaic, but fun. And so starting with some of the positive things, I am going to start with direction, because it's the thing I think I like best about it is I thought it was exciting. Like, I got into some of the action elements. Some of that is story, of course, but mostly it's about pace, design, and shot selection. The animation was visually compelling to me, pleasing and detailed, not just in the look, but in the actual subtle ideas, sometimes jokes, sometimes references, scattered throughout the frames to add meaning and context to the mise-en-scène. I also like the comic timing, which often happens in the edit, especially for an animated film. And the vast majority of the vocal performances I thought were on point and added a lot to the material, so I want to give the director some credit for that. Let's start with direction. Jim, what do you got?
Direction was good. The movie's well paced. It's clear. Like I love action where you can tell exactly what's going on, and especially when you have all of the insect creatures and the vines, you always know where everything is coming from.
It takes a page out of the Spielberg playbook. Spielberg sort of perfected that,
Yeah.
Even though animated. I couldn't help but think, now that you're talking about it, I almost wonder if it should have been live action, even to separate it further from you're going there.
Well, I mean, it's we're already dealing with a meta movie.
Right. So I mean, like
So-
if it was like this young character's favorite movie, this character from Toy Story, and this was his favorite movie, why not make it live action to make it seem like even further distance from the Toy Story universe somehow?
Yeah.
Max, your thoughts on direction?
Yeah, I would agree with everything said. I mean, I thought it was well directed. I could sense danger through the various aspects of what the director was putting together. Could sense a moment of lightness and joy and humor. Nothing seemed like, what was that intended moment? Go Angus.
Angus MacLane, the director. I guess I should have said his name. That's a fair point. I didn't. All right, so that moves us on to performances. I already talked about performances a little bit. In the sense that a lot of them I thought were on point. Like Chris Evans, the Lightyear himself, he's fine. In fact, he's probably perfect in this vision of the character. But if we're going to do this animated universe, I still wonder if it would have made more sense to have Tim Allen do the voice. I assume they felt that because Tim Allen is like the comic version of the character, and this was a more serious iteration. But if this movie was meant to inspire the toy, and if you were making the toy, wouldn't you have the toy's voice be the one from the movie? That's probably way too logical for what they're thinking, but it bothered me. Like, it was definitely bumping for me. It was weird for me not to hear Tim Allen's voice. Tim Allen could have performed it in a similar way that Chris Evans did, where, this is a more serious approach to the character. The toy is sort of mocked a little bit. Max, do you have any thoughts on this from the Toy Story universe?
100% agree with you. I mean, I was perplexed why they didn't get, and I didn't even realize it was Tim Allen. I just knew it wasn't Chris Evans from Toy Story. So it was like, it's an odd, it's almost as if the Broadway production is being made into a movie and they insist on recasting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a tonal choice is my guess, but if you're going to make that tonal choice, then make it live action almost.
It's the tone of money, I think, maybe.
Jim, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I think it's what you said where you're like, hey, I kept thinking about it and coming back to like I couldn't get over that logic. I think I think we're gonna revisit that.
And like, it's in the performances section, and maybe it shouldn't be because it feels like almost like a business decision, because none of this is to take anything away from Chris Evans.
No, I think Chris Evans did a great job. I think Keke Palmer did a great job. I think Taika Waititi was the Taika Waititi in the way that he always kind of is when he does a performance. And
Jim's jumping ahead on me, but yeah, Max, anything further on Chris Evans?
A good job. I mean, no, I didn't think any of the performances were bad or poor.
So talking about Keke Palmer, I actually really liked Keke Palmer as Izzy. And she, to me, is kind of like the heart of the movie. She really made her journey feel grounded, such as it is. Believable energy and pathos and charm. Her in particular, some really nice vocal work. Jim, you alluded to it, so I'll let you add on.
seeing her take that sort of heart role, when I understood that's what it was and where it was going, I really was invested in her character.
Max, anything on Keke Palmer?
I thought Keke Palmer did a great job. I was not taken out by any of the voices at all. She in particular was the heart of the film, like Jim said.
I actually think I said it, but it's okay. We'll give Jim credit.
Okay, JB said.
But as Jim did say, I will give Jim credit for saying almost exactly how I feel about Taika Waititi. His comedic abilities are well renowned, and once again, he does what Taika Waititi does. Very funny and charming. Helped round out this character who's mainly intended for comic relief. Jim already sort of opined. I don't know if you have more to add about that to Taika Waititi.
like you said, it's enjoyable and it's exactly what he does. I feel like they're like, we need a guy to do that thing. All right.
Feels like they overspent for that particular character.
I mean, I kind of wonder if how much of that was just Taika in the recording booth and they just animated around him, and how much was actually scripted. So either it was very well written or they gave him a lot of leeway.
Probably more the latter. Anything specific, Max, about Taika Waititi?
Well, good. I thought it was pretty funny.
This is a kind of character that you would get cast in if you were doing animated films. If people cast you, they'd probably cast you in a similar character. Would you have approached it differently at all?
Well, I would have asked for more money, actually. That's really the only difference.
Interesting. More than Taika. You would have asked for more than Taika. One person I do want to mention, sticking with the team, veteran character actress Dale Soules, who utilizes her trademark gravelly voice to great effect as Darby. I think she gave this minor character great detail and dimension. Anything on Dale Soules, Max?
Yes, actually, she was my favorite. She drew me in every time she opened her mouth. I was just interested in what she was going to say.
Jim, Dale Soules.
Great. It was great. Can I also throw in my favorite performance? I really liked Peter Sona's Socks. I like the whole Socks character.
Socks is probably the best character, which is interesting in the movie called Lightyear. Socks is the best character. You're right. He did a nice job, a lot of fun things. Also, the choice to have him do the beep beeps vocally.
That's what I was going to point out. They made the most interesting writing choices in his character. In a movie that is where the technology is fairly serious, and still have the cat mate go beep boop beep boop. Okay, it's done. I love that.
So now we're going to segue to the area that Jim really has been chomping at the bit to talk about. Everyone wants to talk about the negative stuff, but I like to start positive and work our way down. And even within the screenplay section, there are things that I liked. As I mentioned, I did find the scenarios thrilling. As I also mentioned, much of that had to do with the execution, but the script certainly put them in situations to maximize the excitement. The plot elements were well constructed to maximize entertainment impact, both from an action and comedy point of view. And that reflects back on what Jim was just saying about this choice to have Socks vocally do the beep beeps and boop boops. That's a choice probably made in the script process. But in terms of the structure, now that I'm a teacher, I try really hard to hammer home the 3-act structure. And this film is a great example. It follows the Disney Pixar playbook to the letter, to the point where it's almost obvious. And I feel weird making that a criticism because they did the right thing ultimately. But the next step, once you master 3-act structure, is to hide it so that it feels natural and organic. In this movie, I felt the formula. I felt the bullet points. So the elements were all there, much less organic than they could have been. Max, I'm going to let you take that. What do you think about the structure of the screenplay?
Wholeheartedly agree with the formulaic observation. It had an interesting effect on me. It felt less and less important. It really didn't feel like it had kind of a vitality. I think it felt like that's what somebody should do when they're writing a 3-act structure. The character has a very clear want, and you really see the obstacle ahead of them. Mm-hmm. Their ally and the antagonist, and it didn't feel important to me.
A year ago, it would have been a lot harsher on it. But now that I'm teaching it, I'd be thrilled if one of my students turned in something like this. I'd be so relieved that they figured out 3-act structure, because it's so hard for them to master or even just comprehend, at least my students. Good job there. I want to acknowledge that. But this is a major feature film. And so maybe we can address it as a next level criticism. Maybe one more draft could have made those transitions a little smoother. I don't know for sure, but I mean, there needs to be a better way so that these things don't become so obvious and predictable. Jim,
look, I will say we've talked about the first 30 minutes. The first 30 minutes of this story was actually really interesting and unpredictable. The expectation going into the movie was we're going to see an origin story, but we really start. He's established. We're starting in the middle of the action. I thought that was a really interesting thing to do. From minute 35 to minute 50, every single element of the story was shown and you knew exactly what it was going to do. Elements had giant foreshadowing signs over them. 85% of the people who watch that movie would be able to tell you exactly what the rest of the movie was.
I think that's a high percentage, but certainly 100% in this room.
I think for me, the bigger problem with the screenplay was there were screenplay things where they'd introduce it that I couldn't get over. Was the whole big spacecraft flying, relativistically and aging, was the rest of the universe aging millions of years?
Yeah.
These
So that is my next bullet point. So let me jump onto that
Oh,
because
sure.
plot holes was the next issue that I
Yeah.
had with the script. On the bright side, a lot of the science covered in the film seemed plausible, at least within the fictional world it was building. Jim already sort of alluded to that, so much so that at the handful of times when it didn't, it stood out and pulled me out. Jim sort of hinted at an example. I was trying to avoid specific examples, but I'll just mention the idea of re-entering an atmosphere. It's as if they wanted to establish the science only when convenient. And since Jim started this conversation, I'll let him go from there.
Adults watching this movie who are thinking critically about what is going on are going to have a very different experience than the children watching this movie, who I think will be more amenable to going on the ride. But there are other well-done animated movies for children that keep an internal, consistent logic that don't make me stop and think about why they're doing that.
And from this very company. And in fact, we're
Yes.
sitting in a year where my most recent #1 film was a Disney animated film from 2021 and not a Pixar film. So clearly it is possible. It's the kind of thing that one more draft might have fixed. It reeks of laziness to some degree.
And there are enough moments in the movie that made me stop and think about why they're doing what they're doing. It needed another look over to say, can we fix this issue so that poor Jim isn't going sitting
Yeah, well,
there.
I mean, but there's almost less. They spend so much time working on animation, years and years and years to make these animated films. There's so much more time to go over the scripts. Max, anything on plot holes?
Yeah. No bueno. Avoid them when possible. Plot holes, they don't help the situation very much. You should do another draft.
Neither do potholes. But any
Yeah.
specific plot holes that you want to give out without giving anything away?
There were a couple of things that seemed almost sudden, like the introduction of the creatures that are the next in line to be battled against, and there was a little bit of randomness of that it felt slightly like a video game.
22 years had passed, so I almost bought it. The thing that bumped for me is they said they showed up a week ago. Like that to me was like, that feels a little convenient.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I will say the thing about the native creatures is that they seem to be really inconsistently applied.
Whenever it's time for a joke. And
Whenever-
why is there so much structure outside of their laser shield too? Like they had this laser shield that they were going to protect people, but there's an outpost. There's a mining community and all these other things. They can't get into the laser shield, but there's all these other things they have access to that are not
overridden with vines and being pulled down.
Right.
Right.
Max, it's time to move on to your favorite section. What is it?
It's that special section of the T word.
It is time for the T word. This is where we talk about the themes of a film. Our founder, Davey, didn't used to like to talk about themes. He thought it was a little bit too studious or homeworky. Whenever we wanted to talk about it, we would dance around it, call it the T word. Segment was born. And as a Disney film primarily aimed at kids, the themes of this film aren't as subtle as they sometimes are. I say that, of course, after choosing an animated Disney film as my #1 film of last year that was indeed more nuanced. But the primary theme of this film is, of course, forgiveness, particularly self-forgiveness. There's something going on in the culture right now, a trend related to the idea that we are our own worst enemies, that I could do a whole essay on that I don't have the time to dig into now, but wanted to mention it tonight as food for thought. Now, I don't want to suggest that it's not an important message, even if it is recycled and hammered home hard in this one with almost all of the characters. I think it would have been a little bit better if Buzz was even more haunted. One or two more of those dreams might have been useful. It's easy to let our mistakes define us, especially if they adversely impacted others. We always try to undo those mistakes as if it's the only way to achieve self-forgiveness. But sometimes it's about letting go.
It's interesting you say that, JB. I was sort of stopped before forgiveness because I kept thinking the thing that they keep bringing up and that is really evident is that you can't do it alone. You need a community. You need support. You need
And
friends.
that was sort of going to be my other one that I was getting to. But yes.
I feel like you sort of leapfrogged it to get to the forgiveness part because you're right. I mean, I think the only way to get over all of the sort of burdensome shame and regret would be to have this forgiveness of himself and forgiveness of others. But I just found it so hard to get on board with the theme that I would sort of say is just before yours. We can't go it alone, because this character went it alone in such a degree that the impact was huge, tremendous, universal, or and I felt like that guy should get some shit. I mean, this is, that's not a cool thing.
Some repercussions.
Yes, there should totally be some repercussions. I mean, how could you do that and not feel guilty? That's terrible. So I didn't even get onto the sort of wagon that you're describing in terms of forgiveness, even though I see your point. I see what you mean.
It was a lot of the characters, every time that the Taika Watiti character made a mistake, he would get down on himself and be frustrated, and all the issues that Izzy's character was having. Everybody had to go through that thing where they gave themselves a break. At one point she's like, it's just a mistake, but it's my mistake now. That made it different, and she was the one always calming people down, but then couldn't calm herself down.
Though, how when you're experiencing a story and you have a character who really needs to learn a lesson, and the theme is hammered home so intensely that they're not really able to learn that lesson because the theme is more important than maybe what the character should be experiencing.
I can definitely see that because it was hammered home. Do you feel like it didn't feel real to you, like his journey?
Right. I felt like it missed something that could have taken place to really transform him, and maybe even the funny group of characters that he ends up with.
The one that Max is talking about is one I'm calling trust. But before I start talking about the theme of trust, I want to let Jim opine on forgiveness.
I feel like you guys pretty much said everything about forgiveness. And I'm not really going to add anything new to this.
What else is new?
I mean, if you want, you can just hold up a sock puppet. I can just go. It's cool.
Oh, Jim, the day after his birthday needs a hug.
You're right in that it is an important theme, and I feel that, to Max's point, there is it does get hammered a little bit too much. Maybe Buzz learned his lesson a little bit too easily,
or just not organically.
Yeah.
That we started talking about when we were talking about the formula. All right, so let's talk to Max's theme. The one I'm calling trust, and I definitely think they're connected. Buzz's journey has to do with trust, which is somewhat related to his own inner demons. He feels responsible for the misfortunes of this community and feels like he can't rely on anyone else to help correct the issue. Not the rookies, not the cadets, not the autopilots. It speaks to a larger sense of solipsism. Here is a person who holds on to this mistake and allows it to follow them like a cloud. If someone else were to solve the problem or help solve the problem, it's as if it wouldn't count. It's his fault, and only solving it himself will free him of that burden. So the forgiveness becomes about trust when it's not just about letting go, but also letting others in. So that's how I sort of connected the two themes. Max, are we back in simpatico here?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying, JV. I think maybe you should add solipsism to your list for drinking games.
Do I say it that often? I don't think I do.
No, that's partly why, because it's a treat. The one thing that's challenging, and you lay it out very well, but I still find that it doesn't solve the problem for me, is when you have this kind of mono mental attitude, I made the mistake, so I'm the one who has to fix it. As an audience member, I kind of sit there and go, wow, even the forgiveness aspect is all about you. It's not that there's anything really wrong about what you did. I have to sit here and endure all of your, self,
pity.
Infatuation, albeit partly pity and partly flagellation, maybe.
Well, and that's why I use the word solipsism, just to use it again.
There you go. Here, cheers to that. It made me not really enjoy the character, even though he's kind of an enjoyable guy. The theme actually made me kind of scratch my head and go, that's not the kind of person I would want to have as a friend, really.
I don't think they nailed these things. To your point, they missed them a little bit. I think they're there. I think they tried really hard to make them there, and almost too hard without any nuance, I think is the better way to say it instead of saying too hard.
Definitely.
It was a little on the nose a lot. So in doing so, we lose that impact, I think. Jim, trust.
I think that these were all part and parcel of a slightly larger theme. What I had written down was like specifically maturity, Buzz's maturity in a leadership position, which encompasses his ability to trust, accept help from others.
And forgive himself. himself.
And forgive himself. The Buzz that we saw at the very beginning of the movie is not a leader. Hawthorne is the leader. He is task-oriented. In fact, chafes at being told to work with others.
But to Max's point, even the missions he wanted to complete were about himself.
Yeah, the growth and maturity that we're seeing is one where he's accepting the responsibility of command.
I can see it. And if it were a theme, it's another theme that they really didn't hit. I think they may have missed it. Max, anything on leadership as a theme?
Well, I think it's very well put, Jim. I think it's essentially, with that theme, it's the story of leadership by a 4-year-old, emotional, because it's all about me, and he has a massive amount of responsibility. Maybe some of our leaders evoke some of this sort of "it's all about me" thing.
I wonder which leaders Max could be referring to.
I know.
I do think that there's value in this idea of sometimes you just got to let go instead of torturing yourself the way he does for years.
Sure. Everybody was just absolutely fine with being like, well, I guess this is our situation now, and nobody else should, absolutely nobody else should help try.
All right, so we could dig into these plot holes forever. If we talked any longer, we'd find like probably 20 more. All the negative things we said about it, and there's a lot. I'm still leaning on the positive side of the fence, like a 6 out of 10 kind of thing for me, which isn't amazing, but I had a positive feeling still after watching it. I did get wrapped up in a lot of the action scenes and things like that. So I wanted to share that. So I'm going to wrap things up, guys. Short and sweet, the way we like it. But it's time for closing thoughts. Does anybody have anything they want to say in terms of closing thoughts, or did we cover it all?
I mean, I think we covered it all.
Okay, Max, you good?
I'm great. I just would love to hear from Tim Allen. That's all.
What does Tim Allen think about this movie? Yeah. That'll be, maybe he'll write in the comments. I can say that we're not going to, so this will be our 70th series of episodes. Our 71st isn't going to happen until November. We've got a lot of reading to do in between now and then. These screenplay readings. Jim has already been in one in New York a week or so ago. Max is going to be in the next one in LA in July. And he was also in one in April, the Palm Beach story. So our next current feature is going to be the Black Panther sequel, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. That'll be our 71st series episodes, kicking off on Thursday, November 17th. Our next show, however, of course, is the Indie Spotlight, which is this upcoming Monday, June 26th, with a film that made my top 10 of 2017. Brigsby Bear will be our Indie Spotlight for discussion on Monday. Boys, you want to say goodbye to the audience?
Goodbye, audience.
Goodbye, audience.
They didn't use the opportunity to say to infinity and beyond, but either way, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society now adjourned.